everyone, and welcome back to the George Collection. I'm Rachel Rightside Blonde. There's a lot of similarities between Donald Trump's phrases and phrases or headlines that are used in George magazine, like this.
We will make America powerful again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. Proud, proud, proud.
Also, this song. After all those coincidences and things like Richard Nixon being featured on the first anniversary issue, I think it's not far-fetched to say that JFK Jr. was trying to help us understand true history. Also, interestingly enough, there were 57 original George issues. There were more covers, but 57 issues, and 57 in gematria is George, but it's also Tesla. So, was Tesla technology used in these George magazines to help us understand? I don't know, that's up for debate. But let's get into today's topic, which is the George book of 250 Ways to Make America Better, which again sounds an awful lot like Donald Trump's phrase, make America great again. Weird. The cover says, great ideas on how we can improve our country, and these are from people like Sean Puffy Combs, William Buckley Jr., Dan Rather, Larry King, Michael Moore, and these are very interesting topics. The original George published 2 books. This was the second of the 2. The first one was the George Political Book of Lists. JFK Jr. was rumored to have loved lists, so it makes sense that he would have a book about the Political Book of Lists. But this is interesting. In 1999, this was published, The 250 Ways to Make America Better. I wanted to read the introduction. This is by JFK Jr. himself. George is not just politics as usual. So, when we gathered around the editorial table planning an anthology of 250 intriguing Americans' suggestions on improving this country, we didn't map a route up Capitol Hill. We combed our Rolodexes for more fax numbers than there are seats in Congress. From moguls to movie makers, right-wingers to rabble-rousers, cartoonists to convicts to cookbook authors, we envisioned a convergence of ideas as diverse as the great drama of public life in America. We garnered suggestions from people as young as 13-year-old prodigy artist Alexandra Nikita, as controversial as Mumia Abu-Jamal, an African-American journalist on death row, and as surprising as Lisa Simpson, philosopher extraordinaire and yes, sister of Bart. Music producer Quincy Jones reveals an inspiringly humanitarian agenda. Filmmaker Michael Moore proposes a merging of the Republicans and the Democrats into the Republicrats. Cartoonist Roz Chast thinks that Choco Mint lifesavers should be reintroduced, while folk legend Pete Seeger muses on a frontier community complete with hot tubs for all. As the notoriously conservative Phyllis Schlafly expounds on vital issues of the day, sexpert Susie Bright delves further into, well, the night. While we sure wouldn't want to pack all the contributors into the same 4 walls without calling out the National Guard, George has guided them into the spine of one book, portraying a cross-section of opinion as wide as the Grand Canyon while leaving the boxing gloves at home. Not just anthologies as usual, right? JFK Jr.'s concept of taking Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and everyone in between and putting them into one magazine is employed into this book as well, and I can tell you, he's right. The ideas are as diverse as the Grand Canyon. Now, if you're the editors of George and you're going to curate a list of 250 different ideas that people have to make America better, number 1 is probably going to be pretty important. So let's read what the editors of George chose for the number 1. This is by Stephen E. Ambrose, who's a historian author. We have reversed President Kennedy's admonition to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. One way to begin the process of replacing the demand for entitlements with a sense of responsibility and service would be through a universal service bill that would require all Americans at age 18 to spend a year doing public service work. The model is Franklin Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps. It built roads, bridges, parks, and more. One side benefit is that it would bring the youth of the country together as the draft used to do. Today, teenage boys from Harlem hardly know any whites, and white suburban kids know few, if any, African Americans. Universal service is working today in most European countries. The youngsters who volunteer for the Army are then on active duty for 6 months and in the reserves thereafter. Those who opt for service as a medical technician, teacher, or whatever serve for a full year. The work that gets done is beneficial by itself, but the real payoff is in the experiences gained by the youngsters and the change in their attitudes from demanding to giving, from feeling entitled to recognizing their obligation to serve their country. Wow. That's not a bad idea. Number 2 says, don't let the Chinese beat us with prison labor. This is by Michael Moore, and obviously he's being facetious, but it's kind of interesting. Recently, many enlightened American companies have seen the benefits of cheap and abundant prison labor. Spalding has golf balls packaged in prisons in Hawaii. Microsoft has contracted with a company to package software in Washington state penitentiaries. TWA uses inmates in Ventura County, California to answer its 1-800 reservation number. I say, let's throw as many people out of work as possible and turn those jobs over to hardened criminals. By forcing millions into a life of unemployment, home repossession, and bankruptcy, it is a surefire guarantee that a certain percentage of them will turn to crime to fulfill their selfish needs of food, shelter, and clothing. After their apprehension and conviction, they should be thrown back into the factories where they once worked, factories that now have been converted into prisons. We'll give them their old jobs back and 3 meals a day. But, and here's the great part, we'll only have to pay them $2 an hour. Imagine the return on investment for companies smart enough to take advantage of the world's largest prison population. It'll be good for the country, and the Dow Jones will certainly finally break 10,000. This was written in 1997. And then the second thing Michael Moore says is merge the Republican and Democrat parties into one party. They've already officially done this on their own. We've always known that the Republicans were the party of wealth and privilege, and now we know the Democrats represent the same money interests. With Clinton selling the Lincoln bedroom to the highest bidder and holding 103 coffees, quote unquote, for his corporate contributors, the Democrats are now beholden to the 1% who own 40% of all the wealth in this country. He's making a lot of sense. I'm not saying that the wealthy don't deserve political representation. They are, after all, Americans too. I just question why 1% of the country gets 2 political parties and the rest of us get none. Friends of mine say, hey, how about supporting one of the third parties? I said, third party? What about a second party? We don't even have that. So let's merge the Democrats and the Republicans into the Republicrats and get busy exploring the Labor Party, the Greens, and other new parties that more closely reflect the desires of the electorate. I never thought I'd agree with Michael Moore, but that actually makes sense too. Number 3 is kind of silly. It's teaching people how to flirt. Yes, flirt. That one's kind of silly. Number 4 is also very interesting and makes a lot of sense, and that is the concept of urban agriculture everywhere. These are garden projects and fruit orchards on the land surrounding housing projects, community gardens at senior centers and on church grounds, edible schoolyards, rooftop gardens where tenants can cultivate food for the people in their building. My dream is to see public funding dedicated to supporting these projects, to actually pay people real wages for cultivating city lands. Perhaps more of us will get a clue about how this is connected with personal, physical, psychological, and community health on the most profound level. The more we understand that nature is us, and the more we feel that there is meaningful shared work in the production of our food, the more we can live in a state of mutual caring and respect for one another and for our common home, the earth. This is by Molly Katzen, who is a cookbook author. Number 5 is a cartoon. Number 6 was written by Eric Bogosian, and it says this: nuke it. Not a big explosion, just a minor detonation in an airport or a television production facility. In the short run, things will be worse for lots of people, but not that much worse. The headaches caused by traffic tie-ups and hospital admissions would be far outweighed by the high ratings the networks would enjoy covering the fiasco. In fact, the immense damage and waste would end up giving the economy a boost because people would be buying more stuff to replace the old stuff that got destroyed. Not to mention building bomb shelters and buying Geiger counters, gas masks, home first aid kits, etc. Wall Street would suffer for a month or so, but then the biggest bull run of all time would begin. Why? Because ultimately the country would pull its collective head out of its collective butt and get constructive, sort of a Marshall Plan redux. After a period of martial law, which would only serve to piss people off, a backlash against the military would begin. Everyone would realize that if there were no bombs in the first place, there wouldn't be any explosions, so the vast spending on armaments would begin to slow down. The freed up money would be spent on constructive things such as homes and education, feeding needy children. This in turn would make America, instead of a depressed and dying empire, more productive and fun again. There would be a renewed interest in the environment as people surveyed the devastation. Americans would realize that they have a beautiful country and need to preserve it. A spirituality would ensue because so many people would be thinking about being dead. A revival of empathy would swell up as Americans pulled together and took care of their sick and dying. In other words, America would have a near-death experience, triggering a new attitude, one based on life instead of greed, sloth, and fear. Of course, it may not work out this way. I'm not clairvoyant. If it doesn't, I suggest a larger set of detonations, perhaps exterminating all human life on the planet. Downside, everyone dies. Upside, we get to start all over. Very interesting one. Number 7 says, as Jackie Kennedy Onassis liked to say, if you bungle raising your children, I don't think whatever else you do will matter very much. Very true. If we want to make America a better place, we need to start by making it an easier place for parents to raise happy and healthy kids. In the last few years, scientists have proved what parents and grandparents have long suspected, that the first few years of life are a critical time for intellectual, emotional, and social development. Number 8 is a rant about Newt Gingrich and the Republicans. Number 9, the loser of a lawsuit should pay the legal fees. These days, as soon as a person feels slighted or injured, physically or emotionally, they look for someone to sue. So she's saying, I believe that if the loser had to pay for the lawyers and court costs, people would think a lot longer before automatically blaming someone else for their own mistakes. That's by a tennis player named Martina Navratilova. I think that's how you say her name. Number 10 is a list of 8 things that Quincy Jones says we should do. Number 11 is suggesting parents teach their kids to read before they get to school. Number 12 is by Susie Bright, who's a sexpert, and it's talking about sex. Number 13 is telling stories. Number 14 was by Lisa Simpson. It's interesting that a lot of things happen in the Simpsons episodes, and this is what Lisa Simpson said. I want America to bring about a new golden age for our entire world, where men and women work together as equals, striving toward a more just society, respectful of each individual and of the planet itself, dedicated to peace, honor, liberty, and love. Most of all, I want to live in an America that supplies each neighborhood with a pony as stress therapy for hopelessly misunderstood, highly sensitive overachievers who like historical novels by Gore Vidal, Malibu Stacy dolls, and playing the baritone saxophone. Number 15 was about lifting the unfair embargo on Cuba. Number 16 was by Joan Rivers. She says, I think America would become a greater nation if we elected a woman president. I'm not asking for this immediately. We could work up to it by first having a bisexual president. Also, we need to become a friendlier nation. I see us extending our hands to tourists. I see Democrats embracing Republicans. I see Geraldo and OJ doing the foxtrot. Interesting statement. Having the first bisexual president. Wasn't it Joan Rivers that said this?
The United States will see the first gay president or the first woman president?
We already have it with Obama, so let's just calm down.
Got it.
You know Michelle is a trans...
I'm sorry, she's a what?
A transgender. We all know.
Oh my gosh.
Number 17. Imagine a tax code so simple you could file your tax return on a postcard. Wow, that'd be cool. You write down your total income, then subtract a generous family allowance and take 17% of the balance. That's your tax bill. There's no death tax, capital gains tax, marriage penalty, or Social Security benefit tax. You make out a check, drop it in the mail, and you're done with the IRS until next year. Gone will be all the forms with a set of instructions that explain how to fill them all out. Gone will be the hordes of lobbyists who roam the halls of the U.S. Capitol in search of special favors, deductions, and loopholes. Gone will be the armies of IRS employees, along with the aggravation and humiliation they visit upon Americans today. Instead of harassing the weak and powerless, tax collectors will once again be servants of the people. Gone will be the resentment every taxpayer feels about their brother-in-law, who you're sure knows about a tax break he's taking, but won't tell you about. The flat tax will end for Americans the anguish over a tax system that treats them like second-class citizens. It will create a simple and civil tax code that promotes compliance and restores the people's trust in government. And by cutting taxes and ending double taxation, the flat tax will lead to an investment boom and higher living standards. That will be good for America. That was by Dick Armey. Number 18 was about implementing a course of study in all American schools that would focus on self-development. Obviously, this was by Jack Canfield. Number 19 is by Al Sharpton, and he says, we need to make a commitment toward redistribution of wealth by concentrating on the creation of a fuller employment economy. So any companies that receive federal or state tax breaks, they need to commit to mass training and employment. There also needs to be a drive toward raising the ambitions of young people. America is experiencing a spiritual malady where far too many young people have no goals in life and are absolutely absent of ambition. And number 3, we need to redefine the American hero-heroine. The hero-heroine should be someone who comes from dire circumstances, works their way through school, and takes care of their family, or an inventor or a creator. It shouldn't be someone who jumps through a wall and shoots 40 cops in a movie. The last one I'm going to cover today, number 20, is one I think we could implement today, and I think it would save a lot of people a lot of aggravation. So let's see what this says. A very unpleasant step toward enlightenment awaits us if we're really going to save America. We need to throw out our TVs. My old roommate gave me the gift of a lifetime, no television. Not even a no cable, only one channel works, and that's PBS VCR vehicle television. He refused. I know, without your TV, you think you'll start feeling alone and scared and neurotic, but neurotic is good. Neurosis shows us that our neurons are functioning, right? I'm the kind of person who can bum a cigarette and not become a smoker. Perhaps you're that way about TV. I'm certainly not, and I believe that for everyone, TV gets hypnotic sooner than we think. Commercials sell us our fears, clotted mascara, dirty ovens, and little wrinkles around your eyes. TV shows create our fantasies, fun, flaky friends and guns that fit into our purses. When we commune with the great glowing screen, we start to forget that we dictate the mass media and not vice versa. I agree with a lot of what he said, but I also think that TV does dictate what we believe. I think it's the other way around nowadays. I think TV propagates what it wants us to become. I think that's really clear at this point. Dar Williams wrote this and finishes with, we need to find out which parts of our lives are unmediated. We need to get out there and discover our passions, find out who loves us, what we're proud of, and what we're living for without convenient media intervention. And if there's some show that you just got to see, that doesn't mean you need your own television. You need to know someone who owns one, and let's be real, you do. So throw yours out. Wow, that's just the first 20. There's some really great ideas. There's some silly ones, obviously. But really great ideas, and I think number 1 was really great, and they obviously chose it to be number 1 for a reason. I thought it was interesting that number 17 was about a 17% flat tax, and that number kept getting floated out there. But there's a lot of great ideas in here, and these were from the 1990s. I'm anxious to read the rest of the 250 ways to make America better. The first 20 were that good. I'm also curious to see what people like Sean Puffy Combs thinks we need to do to make the country great, but we'll get to that at a later time. For today, that does it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
Of this extraordinary magazine, George, which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking a cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process, and while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.